Now to the latest on tariffs. President Trump says that he has signed letters to about a dozen trading partners that he will send out tomorrow. So what could this mean for the cost of goods right here at home? ABC's senior White House correspondent Selena Wang is following this from Washington. Good morning, Selena.
Hey, Gio, good morning. The bottom line here is get ready for more tariffs. President Trump says starting tomorrow, he'll be sending letters to countries around the world, setting the individual tariff rate that each one will face, and about a dozen letters are expected to go out tomorrow. So for some context here, let's just step back a little. Remember that back in April, President Trump had imposed these steep tariffs on scores of countries. But after the markets tanked, President Trump reversed course and paused those tariffs for 90 days to allow for negotiations. Since then, very few deals have been announced and businesses have been left in limbo, unsure just how much they're going to have to pay for imported goods. So now Trump is saying, though, that these tariffs could range from 10% to a staggering 70%. That is even higher than the rate that he initially proposed. So the question here is, what's the reason for the change? Well, President Trump says there's simply too many countries to negotiate with, and that sending a letter is easier, Gio.
A lot to follow there, Selena, but also we're following that major bill that passed, what the president calls the big, beautiful bill, of course. So what can you tell us about this? Can you walk through some of this with us? Who benefits, who doesn't?
Yeah, Gio, well, there's a lot to get into. This bill is nearly 1,000 pages long, but analysis from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office finds that the wealthiest Americans will benefit the most, while the lowest income households could lose critical support. So first, if we look at taxes, this bill extends President Trump's 2017 tax cuts, and then workers who get tips or overtime will get a temporary tax break. But it also puts new caps on the amount that students can borrow in federal loans, and it phases out tax credits for green energy.
And what about health insurance? Because so many people are talking about health benefits being impacted here.
Yeah, and this is absolutely critical. Experts say that this is the biggest rollback in federal health support in history. The bill slashes funding for Medicaid, which is estimated to force 11.8 million Americans off of their health care coverage over the next decade. And health experts, Gio, say that the biggest effect there will mostly come from work requirements, not because people aren't working, but because the added red tape and paperwork could cause people to lose their health care. They also expect people to lose access from local health centers shutting down. It also makes it harder for people to get covered under the Affordable Care Act, and it further cuts funding for food assistance programs, Gio.
All right, so much to work through there. All right, Selena Wang, thank you so much for your reporting.
And Gio, President Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill is now poised to kick his immigration crackdown into high gear. The measure injecting a historic $170 billion into detention and deportation efforts. It also adds funding for the border wall and $100 billion for immigration and customs enforcement, an effort to meet Trump's goal of deporting 1 million undocumented immigrants this year. And stay tuned to This Week. Later this morning, George Stephanopoulos speaks exclusively with Steve Myron, chairman of the White House Council of Economic Advisors, and former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers about the potential impact of President Trump's mega bill. Plus, Dr. Richard Besser discusses the potential effects of cuts to Medicaid and food assistance programs.